Why don't we go ahead and get started, and perhaps a few more people might join us as we proceed. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Kathy Puskar with Walsh Colucci, and we are here with our team, and we have our full robust team. We also have our client, Bill Benston is on the line, and you're going to hear from Chris Gordon and Tess Kelly, but we do have a lot of backup in case there are questions on items such as landscaping and traffic, etc. So tonight we are going to present to you the South Greenbrier Street project, which we call Pike West. And we're going to talk to you about the redevelopment of that property where the Greenbrier apartments are located. Before we start, I think we'll go through the presentation. You can certainly raise your hand if you have a question. I think this group is small enough that we can kind of try and address it as we go. If for some reason we miss you, for sure we will come back to you, or if you want to put something in the comments, that's fine too. But like I said, we probably make sense to go through the presentation unless you have a clarifying question, and then we'll come back to other questions. So we'll just go ahead and get started. The entire site is about 4.93 acres. So if you want along Greenbrier and Columbia Pike, there are 117 existing units within 18 buildings that were constructed in 1949. And so I'm sure you all living in the neighborhood are very familiar with these buildings, but just in case, we always like to include a few site photos. As you can see from the exhibit, this property will be broken into two phases. And so tonight we're presenting you phase one, as you can see identified on the exhibit that Tess is showing you. So as I mentioned, we have 117 existing units. With this first phase, we will be demolishing 90 units. And we will have 27 units down in the area where it says phase two. Those 27 units will remain for the foreseeable future until we get to the second phase. Next. So this is just a quick outline of the building footprint and how the building comes together. You'll see that we are creating two new it's a one connected alley that runs around the property, but one to the north and one to the east. And then we are extending 9th Road south. These roads will have different cross sections so that 9th Street will have on-street parking. The alleys will have sidewalks and streetscape, but there will be no on-street parking in the alleys, but they will be walkable.
Just to be clear, we flipped the north is now to the left-hand side of the page, the south is to the right.
Oh, good point. Thanks, Chris. Next. And you can see here on the left is what you would find if you were looking in the neighborhood's form-based code regulating plan. And you'll see that the building, that the property was identified as urban residential. But what you also see is a street grid that cut right through this parcel. And so what we've been working with the advisory working group and staff on is changing the street alignment and converting some of the planned streets to alleys, since those streets only serve this property. And we went to the advisory working group last fall, I believe it was, or at some point, and the county did a request to advertise, and this will be one of the requests that goes forward with us with the proposed projects to change that street alignment and convert the street to the alley. But as we mentioned, these aren't your kind of typical utilitarian alleys. We are treating them with sidewalks and streetscape. They just don't have the full cross section that you would see on a normal street. Next. So in the proposal, we have 400 units that we're proposing in this first building. And of that 400 units, as you all know, affordable housing is a key component of the form-based code, of the neighborhood's form-based code. And so what you'll see is of those 400 units, 124 of those units will be affordable housing. And then, as I mentioned before, we still have the existing 27 units that will remain on that future phase two lot. Now, the affordable housing breaks down to 62 units at 80% of area median income, and 62 units at 60% of area median income. And what the code provides for, actually the base requirement would be 92 units at 60% of AMI, but there is the ability to provide some units at 80% of AMI, but in order to do so, you have to provide more units, so it's a 2-to-1. So what you'll see here is that the client has made a choice to kind of try and get a mix of incomes here. So we will have market rate, 80% of area median income, and 60% of area median income in our new building. The parking, as Chris will go through, is structured parking that is wrapped with the active building use. There are 418 spaces in the garage, plus on-street parking, as I mentioned, on the Ninth Road extension. And then for the phase 2 parcel, there are 20 spaces existing that will remain. And then we will be constructing 12 interim parking spaces to serve those existing buildings until such time as we redevelop that parcel. So you can see that lot right there. Thank you, Tess. And that will satisfy the parking need for those buildings. As to the neighborhood form-based code, we are compliant with all requirements of the form-based code except for 3 items. The first I already spoke about, which is reclassifying the street and relocating it. The second is for a building footprint that exceeds a maximum of 25,000 square feet. And we've had this modification, I think, Chris, on pretty much every neighborhood's form-based code project we have done. And Chris will walk you through that although the footprint has gotten larger than the 25,000 square feet, it's really about how you design that building to break down the mass and scale of the building while also providing the requisite parking wrapped with active uses. And so he'll go over that a little bit. And then the third modification is kind of a blanket cover modification to say, to the extent that what we're doing on this property has created a non-conformity with the existing buildings that will remain, that because they are part of this overall project and part of a future phase of redevelopment, those non-conforming status can remain, or it basically makes them conforming under the form-based code. And so that's kind of the high level of what we're looking for here. And I'm going to turn it over to Chris and Tess to go through the building details, because that's probably more interesting than what I had to say.
So thank you. It's great to be here with everybody to present the project. We spent a lot of time on this project working through the form-based code, working with staff on this, and we thank Arlington County staff for working diligently with us through this, especially through the last 6-7 months of this. Again, we flipped the building so the north is on the left-hand side and then Columbia Pike is on the right. This is just pointing out some key features. There's a bus stop that's directly adjacent to our front entrance. There's quite a bit of grade, as most of you know, across Greenbrier from the lower portion to the north is about a 30-foot grade differential. So we've had to take that into account in designing the building and stepping the massing so that it accommodates that change in grade. Because of that change of grade too, we've used that as an attribute in a number of different cases. The other thing I'd point out too is that there is quite a lot of grade on the east side of the building in the back area where the new streets are going to go. Those streets don't have parking adjacent to them. They're streets without surface parking on it for a reason. But there's quite a lot of grade differential on that backside. So the connection that had been shown in the form-based code regulating plan, where there's an alternate street, is very difficult to actually achieve in a accessible way. So what we did with the topography is the lower portion, we've been able to put a parking garage, and we've wrapped that parking garage with residential, so nobody's going to know it's there except for those tenants within the building, and then created 2 courtyard spaces, where one is a very active one and one's a little bit more of a contemplative space. The other features I'd like to point out too are the entrances to the building. The form-based code asks for multiple entrances and having transparency at the ground floor level. So we have major lobby entrances. The main lobby entrance is there where Tess is pointing out on Greenbrier Street in the middle. And then there's another secondary one over on the southern side on 9th Road South. Also along that area too, the blue dash I'll point out is the BES, where the regulating plan dictates a very strict alignment with the architectural relationships. And then the last thing I'll point out is that rooftop amenity. So that's actually the parking garage, the last floor of the parking garage, which we have chosen to amenitize and put outdoor recreational areas, green areas for the tenants within the building itself. Let's go to the next one. So we'll walk up. We don't have all the plans here because I don't think we need to bore you with all the typical plans, but this is the lower level, and this will give you some idea about the change in grade and how we've accommodated that. So the lowest level of the garage and the lowest level of the turquoise is the residential units. Those are actually stooped units, so you actually have entrances coming into right into those are duplex units, so they have an internal stair within them. They are accessible because they're going to share a garage. They're going to share the elevators within the building itself, so they can actually be directly connected into it. But you can get some idea from that lowest level to the next level up. You're getting just a little bit larger in terms of the footprint, and then you see the garage starts to show up to the lowest level of the garage. This is also the main lobby to the building. The main lobby has been placed in this location not only for convenience to Greenbrier, the bus stop, and to Columbia Pike on the south, but it's also been designed so that at all levels within the building, even though terraces can be connected by a common stair and elevator. It's a two-story lobby. Leasing office is going to be on this lower level, but it will open up to daylight on the backside in the courtyard space on the next level up.
You have that level. Sorry.
Yep. So Tess, do you want to go over some of the functions
Sure.
of this floor?
So as Chris was saying, we have a two-story experience in the lobby. So you enter off Greenbrier into this club room, which looks directly out onto our activated courtyard. Because we've done the wrapped garage scenario in this building, these are at-grade courtyards. So we're able to have, planting with real trees and avoid some of the challenges of elevated courtyards. And again, we're still, below the grade of the high point on the site, so it's not a complete floor plan for the building. And on the back side is where we have the garage entrance and trash and loading. So
you can start to see a retaining wall on that lower on the back side too.
Yeah, and as we move up through the building, you can kind of see how this retaining wall wraps around. As Chris touched on earlier, accessibility on the site is very important, and though Greenbrier itself isn't considered accessible because it's more than a 5% grade, we've maintained less than a 5% grade on the alleys in 9th Road South to make them all accessible so that all of these sidewalks are a manageable grade, and it provides a walking loop around the building.
Also, one of the major considerations from the civil engineer side of it is, again, with the grades, the grade differential from the high side to the low side, we have to be able to drain the adjacent properties. The adjacent properties, drain across this site. So part of the design for this from the civil engineering side is that retaining wall also creates a water management swale that runs around the site.
And the retaining wall is offset from the property line a minimum of 7 feet and more in several locations. And then there's planting below the retaining wall, and then the alleyway, more planting, sidewalk, and then the 4-foot dooryard as prescribed by Arlington County. So we went through a lot of conversations with the advisory working group, making sure that this was a enjoyable streetscape for everyone involved.
And then also point out the building A and B, we have a distinction between the two of these sides of the building. And this is due to the grade differential, again, from the lower side on the south to the north. Building codes require us to split them. Here on this elevation, you can really see what that means. That's where that split is actually happening. That's a monumental stair adjacent to it. We think that's a great feature. So it's eyes on the street, sort of a grand stair for all the levels to participate in. You can start to see on the top too the amenity space that opens up onto the garage itself. The brick materials are brick, different types of brick that is, and metal panel systems on the front entrance area.
So part of the form-based code is breaking the building massing down into multiple facades and incorporating very deliberate interruptions in those facades so that the building massing is read as multiple parts. And we think especially with the way we define the building as two separate structures and stepped with the terrain. So building B is 2 stories taller than building A, but really they're the same number of stories from grade, helps really make this building read as a combination of distinct elements.
And we're also using one of the new amendments to the form-based code, which is these notches in the building facade.
So yes, and I didn't say it, but the first one was Greenbrier Street. So this is your main elevation, and this is the main lobby here, marked with the darker brick coming up, creating an iconic tower that can be seen from Columbia Pike. And then we'll swing around the building. This is the 9th Road side. So this is one of those secondary lobbies. And again, you can see how it's broken up into multiple facades with interruptions. In most locations, we've used these notches in the facade to be an opportunity for balconies. And here you can start to see the alleyway kind of fading into the distance.
And also the stoop units here. These are the duplex units there and their front entrances.
So these doors and windows and the ones on the level above all belong to one unit. And we felt like the scale really tied into the scale of the units found in the community surrounding. This is the east facade on the rear alley with the garage entrance and exit and both loading dock bays. And then finally, the north-facing facade. We've got 2 balcony stoops at grade here, and then at the corner is the secondary lobby with a small plaza area out front. And this is probably much easier to envision with the 3D renderings. So this is a rendering. You can kind of see the key plans we have here in the lower corner. Standing across Greenbrier, looking at that main lobby, and you can start to really see what doesn't show up very well in plan and elevation, the large interruptions in the facade that really break it into multiple building masses.
And we're trying to accentuate the depth of the building, so you can see how the facade for the bay windows are sort of facades that are peeling off the main fenestration, but then the reveal comes in afterwards. So there's a lot of depth. It's not just a flat facade. We're trying to accentuate the dynamic of the not only the topography along Greenbrier Street, but just the movement along Greenbrier Street.
Definitely, and we've also focused on defining, the base of the building, and so that's with additional detailing in the brick at some levels and changes in brick color. And then as we go up, having panels at the top, so there's really a hierarchy in the building facade. This is from the corner. We've got Greenbrier on the left and 9th Street on the right here. So these are those duplex units we referenced earlier, and your main lobby is about halfway down the block here.
Swinging around to the rear street on the east side of the building and 9th.
And so kind of referenced artistically here, this is where we begin a little bit of the retaining wall that leads back towards the rear corner.
And there's that building entrance there too. There's a a grade difference there, so there's a little bit of a grade ramp.
And then this is the northwest corner. So with the small plaza that we created up front in the secondary lobby. And you start to see how the facades on Greenbrier, read differently, but still make reference to the facades along the alley.
Now we're ready for questions. I don't see any hands raised right now.
We've explained it perfectly.
Austin, did you?
Yeah, can you guys hear me all right?
Yes.
You sure can.
Awesome. Well, it's a beautiful building. Sorry, I've got some children making noises behind me from the stuff outside.
There's no apologies necessary anymore.
It's the new world we live in.
It's a new world.
I have two. So I have two questions, and they're kind of based out of a couple of concerns, just about what I know about living in the neighborhood and kind of that general vicinity. The first is about, and you touched on it very, very briefly, but stormwater management. That area of Columbia Pike, I'd say in the last couple of years, has seen some pretty decent sized floods. And I know I'm not an engineer or anything, but I imagine with the current property, having so much, open space and land,
Right.
it's probably better than, the big structure you guys have, showed us today, as far as being able to handle these big rainstorms that we've been getting. What
Right.
kind of precautions have you guys taken to accommodate any sort of, residual effects that might happen to manage, stormwater coming down off the hill?
So we'll have Travis, our civil engineer, answer that question. One thing I just wanted to point out, though, and it was pretty horrific what's been going on there. There is a lot of open space there now, but however, there is no stormwater management system in the project as it's currently designed. Not this project, I'm saying the existing property, that is. But Travis, you want to?
Yeah, I'm Travis Brown. I'm with Walter L. Phillips, the civil engineer for the project. So, we're providing 3 substantial stormwater detention facilities located at different areas of the site, sort of going with the topography. And these facilities are sized to sort of take not only the stormwater that would bring it back to the pre-development conditions, but there's an improvement factor that we've added in coordination with the county to make sure that we're, making the situation better. And, I think what Chris said, is kind of a larger point here, is that, there's no detention or facilities on site today. And there's actually quite a bit of surface parking and, building, obviously we're increasing some of the impervious area on the site, but these facilities are intended to make the situation a lot better downstream.
Tess, can you go to the plan to show some of the stormwater detention? You can see some in this perspective here, but we actually have stormwater detention along Greenbrier Street itself. The rooftop amenity on the garage actually serves that function, and then the 2 courtyards also. But also there are some underground facility under the alley storage facilities.
Under the alley, it's these large arch-shaped storage tanks that essentially, take up maybe a third of the alley space. So they're pretty significant in size.
That's great. So it sounds like you're saying, however it shakes out, it's gonna be an improvement to the general vicinity in this respect.
Yeah, we worked with Arlington County stormwater staff, and identified this site, as needing to have a very robust system. So I think, what we're proposing, and I believe staff would agree, is going to make a big difference in how much water is actually discharging. There will be a controlled release from this site, and it will be connected directly to the storm system. So there won't be any overland flow into Columbia Pike. It'll all be piped through the storm system.
That's great. That's awesome. My second question is probably going to be a little bit more problematic, and it's just about the parking. So I haven't really introduced my role in the community, but I'm the president of the Civic Association right now. And if I had to boil down one problem in our zone, it's on the scarcity of on-street parking. So when we're talking about a building that's going to basically triple the density of the existing property, but only providing, it seems like you're providing about one parking space per unit for 400 units. It just doesn't seem to me that that's a comprehensive parking solution. And I know that there's standards in the county, but I wonder if you guys have consulted with anyone over there in the parking department about the situation in Arlington Mill, the scarcity of on-street parking, and if you guys have exhausted all solutions as to adding more spaces, including making the parking spaces a little bit thinner, exploring widening that alleyway around the building that you have there, or potential phase 2 solutions that would include more parking spaces. Because remember, parking is not always just for those that are living in the units. Most families own more than one car, and then folks also enjoy having visitors. I think that's a big amenity to living in. I'd say it's a big challenge for a lot of families living in Arlington in these styles of buildings. It's very hard to host any kind of gathering, or get friends or family from other parts of Northern Virginia. So I'm just concerned about the number, the actual number of parking spaces, and I thought I'd ask for your thoughts on that.
Yeah, so in looking at the parking, as I mentioned, we're providing 418 spaces in the garage. Per the form-based code, the requirement is 414. And the way that breaks down is that our market rate units are required to provide 1.125 parking spaces per unit, and our affordable units, Chris, I think that's too small to
Yeah.
I don't think we need to. It's 0.7 spaces. So it's 1.125 spaces for the market rate units, which is a total of 276 spaces. And of those 276 spaces, 35 are anticipated to be shared. So it's basically 1 space per unit plus 35 shared spaces. For the affordable units, that requirement is lower. It's 0.7 spaces per unit, and then 0.125 shared spaces per unit. So that's 87 reserved spaces and 16 shared spaces. So 51 spaces in that garage will be shared. And the rest will be apportioned 1 per unit for the market rate and slightly lower for the affordables. And the parking ratios were determined by the county when they went through the process with the Columbia Pike form-based code. And the whole goal was to rely on the robust transit system on Columbia Pike. And then as it relates to affordable units, what their surveys and studies have shown is that those who live in the affordable units tend to have less cars. So there could be a possibility that you're having people choose to live here who don't have cars. But that is kind of the approach to parking. And then, as I mentioned, we added spaces at the bottom of the hill to make sure that those units had a similar parking ratio.
And I don't know if Matt Matusik or staff has any historic data on some of the recently completed projects where it has been parked at that ratio. I do know we've been involved with Columbia Hills, an all affordable project, and they have, and it's free parking, and they have more than enough parking spaces, a lot unused. And that's
I think
0.8, I think.
Yeah, and for the record, this is Matt Matuzak, Arlington County Planning Division staff. To Austin's, I think earlier main point, this really gets into how do redevelopment proposals that continue to come in, throughout the county and anywhere really on Columbia Pike, but specifically here on the west end, how are they being coordinated with the residential permit parking program, which continues to be extended in terms of its final recommendations. We're anticipating something to be put forward late last year. My understanding is they are closer to the finish line, but not quite there. We, however, are regularly communicating status updates in terms of redevelopment activity to the extent that it can inform how they consider different neighborhoods and what their proposals might include to improve and either continue with the program or make changes to it. So that they're fully aware of development activity that's being planned and continually incorporate that in terms of new density that's coming online, the parking that it's supposed to replace and then reintroduce in terms of new garage spaces. And we've kind of considered that, during the review process, which really took, most of the last 2 years, to consider how can we ensure that on-street parking on Greenbrier is maintained. The new roadway that kind of connects to the back of the site also has some on-street parking, although it's limited. And again, a lot of this is really geared towards the type of residents that the owner might attract, knowing that it is a mid-rise building as opposed to a garden-style community, which I think people are targeting, a little bit differently than they would be otherwise when they would see a huge sea of parking spaces, and knowing that maybe that is something suitable to meet their needs if they do have multiple cars or, tend to rely on that type of inventory.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate the answers, and I did anticipate, hearing most of what I heard. I guess I'll just kind of ask again though: have all options been exhausted to potentially increasing just that volume? Because in a new development project, if there is space, it's better to use it than not use it. When we read through those numbers of what the requirements are in the form-based code, I mean, I know this is just kind of what it is. This is what's in the form-based code for suggesting that folks that have lower income have less cars. It's just, I guess that that is true sometimes, or maybe it's true most of the time. But as you shake out the math and what I'm looking at for this property, it just seems like we went with the bare minimum amount of parking that we had to for the form-based to meet the requirement of form-based code. So I guess that's my main point. This is a big problem in the neighborhood, and so as things continue to progress, I'm just fearful that density is going to keep increasing, and this is going to continue to be a big problem.
Yeah, understood. We have maxed out the parking, as you can see, kind of within the property, as Chris showed it earlier. It's that footprint that's wrapped by the actual building. And so that's where we are in the design. And as you mentioned, it's what the code requires. I think Matt's comments about kind of the things that the county looks at in terms of those residential parking permits and on-street stressors is an important one. And I also think that redeveloping the property and actually having more parking in a structured garage will help the situation because it is providing parking for those units.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I don't see any other hands. If others have questions, you want to raise your hand. There's a up by the control panel where it says leave. There's actually a hand there. If you have a question, go ahead and hit that, and we can.
Or just unmute yourself. It's a pretty small group, so.
Yeah, I guess so. You can just unmute yourself. Okay.
This is Matt from the county again. before this gets too awkward, I'll figure out throw one out there. Can, it is a helpful question, which I think we normally do get at these type of meetings. Can you all speak to what the anticipated timeline might be? Staff is usually asked, what can we anticipate? Right. And I know from our side, we usually kind of, discuss that the type of review process this went through. Moving forward, we are anticipating this, along with its associated amendments, to reach the county board in November. And of course, the Planning Commission right before that. But beyond those hearings that are still coming up later this fall, is there any kind of expectation, especially during the pandemic that we're in the middle of? Has that changed the thinking of, how this might proceed? And how much would you like to share this evening?
Well, let's fill it around.
Yeah. We are, I think, ready to proceed, immediately after approval. So as you know, we have to do the final engineering site plan and go through a lot of administrative reviews with the county in order to pull permits. But we would anticipate starting about 9 months after approval, and then it would be an 18 to 24 month construction timeframe. We will be working with the county on how we phase the building and when different parts of the building get certificates of occupancy. But I don't think any of us can predict exactly what this pandemic has in store for us in the next however many months, but we're going to do our best to keep this project on track and move it forward regardless. And in terms of course, we have existing residents on this property who are going to be impacted by our construction process, and we will have tenant relocation plans and be working very closely with them so that there are no surprises relative to the timing of relocation and assistance with relocation. So all those pieces have to fit together, but just from a broad timeline, I think, that's the path that we're tracking on.
Hey, this is Austin again. I do have one question about those relocation services, and I recognize that I'm not sure who on the call may be best prepared to talk about this, but will the current residents of this property be given any sort of preference when it comes to some of those affordable units and being able to move back to the property into some of those affordable units? Is there any kind of mechanism built in there to kind of keep track of those folks that are going to be displaced?
So we haven't worked through all the details of the tenant relocation plan. So I don't know 100% the answer to that, but certainly if there were those who wanted to come back, I do know I have worked on past projects, and that has always been an option for people to come back. It becomes a little bit tricky because if they move and they're displaced for 2 years, sometimes once they get to that new location, they're happy to be where they are. But we're going to continue to work with staff, and I don't see a reason why they wouldn't be able to come back if they wanted to. And if they met the criteria for affordability. Of course, we're going to 60% and 80% of affordability, so it's a different criteria. Matt, do you have?
Yeah, just to fill in the some of the gaps from what I would suspect housing staff would mention if they were here this evening, and that what we're emphasizing and going to continue to work with the applicant, which happens on every project anywhere in the county. It's not anything unique really here, but anytime I think redevelopment is anticipated on a property that currently is occupied by a residential use, like here, we want to, apply the entire spectrum of tools that we have to accommodate the existing tenants in whatever assistance they might need for this initial period. Kathy mentioned, 9 months following November is when they expect to be in a position to potentially get some of their initial construction permits. And that gives us a very clear window from which to work on with these residents and make sure that at least during the construction window, they're all being taken care of and utilizing the entire menu of options that I think the county offers in these situations. The other part of your question, though, is much bigger, which is depending on their unique circumstances, can they qualify and go through the process like everybody else in the county that maybe express interest? And what is that interest like, in terms of, seeing a new project on Columbia Pike with this many available units? I know from past experience working with APA on some of their projects like Columbia Hills, sometimes there were, significant waiting lists because of the interest that was expressed. So I can't really speak to any kind of guarantee, but we were certainly established a project contact here, and staff will be closely monitoring the timeline so that when those opportunities become, we'll make sure that we can get that out to everybody.
We do have additional hands up. We'll go to Noreen and then Amy. Oh, somebody just put their hand down, but go ahead, Noreen. She there?
Sorry. So I go down Greenbrier a lot, and I have seen those wires that go down the street on that particular side. I assume that you're undergrounding before you're raising the existing buildings, or how is that going to work?
Yes, we are undergrounding the utilities
Yes.
on Greenbrier.
Are you asking about the sequence or?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Travis, can you speak to that?
Yeah, so generally the existing buildings can be demolished along with other features on site because they're generally set back from those existing poles. But the undergrounding will occur as one of the first items in the contractor's workload. I mean, it has to be done up front essentially, but demolition can occur concurrently.
Okay, so it sounds to me like this won't start any earlier than next fall, roughly. Late summer, early fall.
Yeah, probably. I'm trying to add up 9 months. Probably next summer.
Next summer, okay, because I know it takes a while to get through zoning and everything else, so.
Yeah, but we're always optimistic. Don't you know that? The reality may be something different, but we got to keep the client's hopes up, right?
Yeah, okay, fine. I mean, it's a little over a block from my house, so I'm not looking forward to all that dust and everything, and noise, but
Right.
There you go. The price of progress.
Amy, you have a question?
Yeah, just for some clarity in terms of who processes the folks who apply for the affordable housing units. Is that in conjunction with DHS? How is that being handled?
This is Matt again. There is a specific protocol that is run by our housing division, and an initial preview of what we can anticipate has already been kind of established in a framework that we call the Affordable Housing Plan, that every project that utilizes the neighborhood's form-based code has to submit at this stage. And what we do as we get further into the final engineering plans and as we get closer to the actual timing of construction, we do have additional steps that take place in terms of marketing of those units, and verification that has to take place in terms of people's incomes, household sizes, and the volume of people that may be applying for that. So that is something that's going to happen in tandem between the county staff and the housing division and the applicant, to make sure that that announcement is very broad and public. And then we, pretty quickly after that, once it closes, work through the application list and have a good sense of, if it has to be advertised again because we don't have enough qualified tenants, or we have a wait list and we have to make sure that the ones that did get approved can still fulfill that commitment. And, as the project goes on. So we'll provide some additional context from our housing division that will be monitoring this post-approval. And those will be the individuals that you could kind of get more information on, likely, sometime next year when that comes together.
Thanks, Matt. So I'm also curious because I know our dedicated affordable housing on the Pike has residential services available to their tenants. And I'm just curious because this is a mixed project, if there's any thought or idea in terms of providing some kind of services similar to what APA and AHC do.
This is a different project because it's not a tax credit deal. These are units that are being provided as part of that neighborhood's form-based code requirement to provide affordability. So it probably will not have the same types of things that you'll see in some of those kind of entirely, tax credit deals with those not-for-profit entities. That being said, the units in this building will have access to the amenities and things that are provided to the market rate units.
I don't see any other hands right now. If anybody has a question, just go ahead and unmute and ask.
Yeah, this is Austin again. I was going to ask about the phase 2 space, and if I'm looking at the map correctly, there's existing garden style apartments on that space. Are those going to are those residents going to also be vacated from the property during construction?
No.
And then what is? Oh, they're not. Okay.
No, those residents will be able to stay in their units. There are 27 apartments on that site, and those will stay in operation, which is why we are adding what you'll see is that interim parking there to make sure that they have adequate parking during the construction of this project.
And so I guess my next question is just about the phase 2 site in general. I'm not really up to speed on why is there a phase 1 and a phase 2? What's preventing this team from developing the whole site right now?
Financing, marketability, there's a number of things. So when you build a residential building, there's usually a certain amount of density in units that the market can absorb. And so that's one piece of it is, building it in pieces to make sure that you can get the one project financed, get it built, get it occupied. And then also the building at the intersection of Columbia Pike and Greenbrier is actually a very different building because it's going to be taller. So it's probably a different construction type as well, and has kind of a public open space at that intersection. So the idea is to build the first building, get that occupied, and then move forward with the second phase as soon as the timing and the market is right. Chris, did you have something you wanted to add on that?
No, that's about right. You spelled it out. I mean, 400 units is a lot of units to bring on a market at one time. And, the people that invest in a project like this want to monetize it as quickly as possible. They don't want empty units sitting there unoccupied. So it takes time to, lease up a building like this. On the other hand, I would say that, our experience with Centro is 95% occupied after a year, which is pretty phenomenal.
It's great, yeah.
I'll bet Harris Teeter had something to do with that. How's the commercial rental going on that building?
You mean the retail end at the base?
Yeah,
I think it had all been, as far as I know, pre-COVID or at least 4 or 5 months ago, all of it had been leased up except for 15,000 square feet. And that's, I take that back, 5,000 square feet was what remained. And it apparently filled up pretty quickly. There was a lot of interest, and you can see that the retail is there is pretty mixed. It's got a lot of different types of uses. I don't know what's going on right now, if the last remaining portions of it is filled up or not.
Thanks.
Will there be retail space as a part of the phase 2
Yes,
in this
it's required.
Greenbrier spot?
Yeah, that's required. Also, that's another part. That's a different designation than the urban residential. So it requires retail at the base as well.
On that corner.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So is that going to be around that urban park, or how's that going to work?
Yeah.
It would be on the it would be on the building frontage, almost similar to Centro. This isn't as big a space, but you know how Centro kind of frames the park area?
Right.
It would be the same.
Okay.
Yeah, we parked underneath Centro's public space too. I don't know if that's going to be necessary here, but we'll see when we get to that. Okay.
And it's not, I don't think it's 100% requirement, Chris. I think it's an optional. And so I think we'd have to see if there is.
You mean the residential, you mean, or?
The retail at that base?
Oh, the retail at the base?
Yeah. Yeah.
I thought it was required, but I think it might be the percentage of how much is going to be required there.
Got it.
I don't think it's been I don't think it's very clear.
Yeah, I think we need to go back and look at that because honestly, I haven't looked at phase 2 in a while, but we can verify that. But if there, to the extent there is, Matt, do you know offhand, is it required or optional at that corner? I thought it was a retail frontage, but the client's thinking that perhaps.
My understanding is that it's optional. It's an urban mixed-use frontage, and anywhere we typically identify those, it was adjacent to or across the street from the commercial form-based code.
Right.
It's going to help complete that intersection.
But there's also a concern, I think, that if you try and force retail in a space that it doesn't want to be, that can be a worse outcome than, you know, if it is retail. But whatever the code requires, we'll provide it. And to the extent that it's optional, if there is a market for it, then I think you'll see retail there too. I haven't looked at that in a while because we've been so focused on phase 1.
Yeah, the nice thing about urban mixed use, I think, is among all the different labels that we assign throughout the code, that one I think has the broadest list of permitted uses. So residential, commercial, hotel, you name it, because it's typically found along Columbia Pike in more prominent areas. This one even has a urban plaza in front of it. But again, I think even to Austin's earlier point, the reason why this and other property owners have the option to phase develop their project is because we intentionally carved that out when the form-based code was constructed, knowing that we're dealing with large sites. Many have irregular shapes and configurations. And given the building heights that were identified at the earlier planning stages, it wasn't likely that an entire property could come in and completely redevelop. And you saw that with Appa's project down on Frederick Street. That was simply just one phase. They didn't redevelop their entire property outright.
Well, seeing no other hands up, if anybody has a last burning question, we'd be happy to answer it, but we also want to be respectful of your time.
We did record this, so if anybody needs a copy of that, it'll be made available. Or if others that had been, I noticed there were a lot of other people that said they were going to attend that did not. It'll be available for them to view.
So I think what we're going to do, Chris, is forward it to Matt when you guys have it, and however you do that, forward it to Matt, and Matt can make it available. Is that how you want us to proceed, Matt?
Yeah, we'll add it to our project website, and also the form-based code advisory working group page. I can let all the community stakeholders know once it's available. And again, if there's questions that come up even afterwards, you guys know how to reach us. And again, our goal is to kind of keep working towards the November public hearings when the Planning Commission and County Board have their opportunity to consider this.
All right. Well, thank you guys for coming out and joining us virtually. And we look forward to talking with you again soon, I suppose, at the Planning Commission and/or County Board.
Thanks very much.
All right. Take care, everyone. Have a good evening. Bye-bye.
See you guys.